Captain Alina Rhodes stood at the viewport of the transport vessel, watching as the Galactic Defense Academy materialized before her. The massive structure floated in space like a crystalline snowflake, its transparent sections revealing thousands of beings from across the galaxy within. Her heart pounded against her ribcage, not from fear, but from the crushing responsibility weighing on her shoulders. She was humanity's first and only representative at the Academy, chosen after Earth's recent discovery by the Galactic Council. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated as they approached the docking bay, causing several of her alien fellow passengers to stumble. Alina remained steady, years of zero-gravity training keeping her balanced. A tall, silver-skinned Validian warrior named Crixther sneered at her from across the chamber. The human remained standing. Perhaps their primitive evolutionary adaptations have some use after all. Alina bit back a sharp retort. She'd been warned about the Validians, a warrior race that dominated the Academy's upper ranks. Their natural armor and superior strength had made them arrogant, dismissive of species they deemed lesser. She'd face enough of their prejudice soon enough. The docking procedure completed with a gentle shudder, and the passengers began disembarking. Alina grabbed her regulation pack, containing everything she was allowed to bring from Earth. As she stepped onto the Academy's pristine white floors, a holographic figure materialized before her, the Academy's AI coordinator Nexus. Captain Alina Rhodes, Earth representative, the AI's voice echoed in her mind rather than her ears. Your presence has generated significant discussion among the faculty. Many question the wisdom of accepting a species with no prior interstellar experience. I'm here to prove them wrong, Alina replied firmly, her green eyes reflecting the determination that had earned her this position. Indeed, your quarters are in Section 7, Level 12. Your first evaluation begins in 30 minutes. Be advised, the gravity will be set to Validian standard. Alina's stomach dropped. Validian standard gravity was nearly 3 times Earth normal. She'd trained for this, but the reality of it sent a chill down her spine. Still, she straightened her shoulders and headed for the designated training arena. The evaluation chamber was massive, with tiered seating filled with various alien species, most watching her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. At the center stood Crixther, his silver skin gleaming under the harsh lights. "The human arrives," he announced, his voice carrying across the arena. "Let us see how she fares in real gravity." The moment Alina stepped into the training circle, the increased gravity slammed into her like a physical blow. Her muscles screamed in protest as she fought to remain upright. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but she refused to show weakness. Around her, whispers and chuckles echoed from the audience. "Begin combat evaluation," Nexus announced. Crixther moved with impossible speed, his armored fist whistling through the air where Alina's head had been a split second before. She dropped and rolled, using the momentum to put distance between them. The increased gravity made every movement a battle, but Alina had spent months studying Validian combat footage. They relied on their superior strength and armor, making them predictable. "The human knows how to dodge," Crixther taunted, circling her. "Is that all Earth's champion can do? Run." Alina remained focused, controlling her breathing as she had trained. The pain in her muscles was intense, but pain was just information. She watched Crixther's movements, noting how the increased gravity affected his balance. The Validian might be stronger, but his high center of gravity was a weakness. He charged again, this time with a combination of strikes that would have pulverized a normal human. But Alina wasn't normal. She was the product of humanity's relentless drive to overcome its limitations. She waited until the last possible moment, then dropped and swept her leg through Crixther's ankles while he was mid-strike. In the heightened gravity, his momentum worked against him. The mighty Validian warrior crashed to the ground with an impact that shook the arena. The silence that followed was deafening. Alina forced herself to stand, every muscle screaming in protest. She looked down at her fallen opponent, who stared up at her with a mixture of shock and confusion. "Humans don't just run," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We adapt, we overcome, and we never ever give up." The chamber erupted in chaos as various alien species began talking all at once. Alina spotted several instructors hurriedly consulting their data pads, while others argued animatedly. She had made her point, but this was just the beginning. They thought humans were weak because we lacked natural armor, because we weren't the strongest or the fastest. But they would learn what humanity's real strength was: the indomitable will to push past any limit, to endure any pain, to achieve what others deemed impossible. As medical drones attended to Crixther's wounded pride, a small, reptilian alien instructor approached Alina. "Fascinating technique," she said, her vertical pupils dilating with interest. "You used our own gravity against the Validian. Perhaps we underestimated your species' potential." Alina managed a smile despite her exhaustion. "That's just the beginning, instructor. Humans have a saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and we've spent our entire history proving it true." As she limped back to her quarters that evening, Alina knew she had won a small victory. But the real challenge was just beginning. The Academy would push her to her absolute limits and beyond. They would try to break her, to prove that humans didn't belong among the stars. But they would learn what Earth had learned long ago: never bet against a human's ability to defy the impossible. The morning after her victory over Crixther, Alina woke to find her muscles locked in agony. Every movement sent waves of pain through her body, the price of fighting in triple Earth's gravity. But she forced herself up anyway, knowing that showing weakness now would undo everything she had accomplished. The Academy's medical bay was eerily quiet when she entered. The chief medical officer, a floating gelatinous being named Dr. Vex, undulated with surprise at her arrival. "Captain Rhodes, your biological readings are concerning. Most species require at least 3 days of recovery after exposure to Validian gravity." "I don't have 3 days," Alina replied, trying to keep the pain out of her voice. "I need something that will let me train today." Dr. Vex's translucent form rippled with what might have been concern. "Fascinating. Your species' drive for self-destruction appears to be a feature, not a malfunction." Nevertheless, the doctor administered a series of treatments that dulled the worst of the pain. Alina's first real training session was scheduled in the Academy's infamous Crucible, a massive chamber designed to push trainees beyond their physical limits. As she entered, she found herself among a diverse group of alien species, including a crystalline being named Zyra and a 4-armed warrior monk called Threshold. The instructor, a battle-scarred veteran from a species Alina didn't recognize, appeared as a hologram simultaneously before each trainee. "Today's exercise is simple: survive. The gravity will increase gradually until you can no longer stand. This establishes your baseline." The session began at Earth-normal gravity but quickly intensified. Alina had trained for this, had spent months preparing her body for increased gravitational stress. By the time they reached double Earth gravity, half the class had already tapped out. At triple gravity, even the mighty Threshold fell to one knee. Alina remained standing, though every fiber of her being screamed for relief. Sweat poured down her face, her muscles trembled, but she refused to fall. The instructor's hologram flickered with interest. "Remarkable endurance, human, but pride will not save you from physics." As the gravity continued to increase, Alina felt her bones creaking under the pressure. But something else was happening. She began to understand how to move more efficiently, how to distribute her weight, how to use minimal energy to maintain her stance. It wasn't about raw strength, it was about adaptation. "Impossible," a voice cut through her concentration. Crixther had entered the chamber, his silver skin still bearing faint marks from their previous encounter. "She's using some kind of technology. No unaugmented being could withstand this pressure." The instructor's hologram scanned Alina thoroughly. "No technology detected. This is pure biological adaptation." There was a new note in the instructor's voice: respect. Finally, at nearly 5 times Earth gravity, Alina's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, but even then she refused to go all the way down. The gravity returned to normal, and she somehow found the strength to stand again. "Well done, Captain Rhodes," the instructor said. "You've set a new record for non-augmented species." As Alina left the crucible on shaking legs, she overheard whispered conversations. Word of her performance was spreading quickly through the academy. But not everyone was impressed. She caught fragments of disturbing discussions, mentions of the human problem, and maintaining proper order. That evening, as she sat in the Academy's vast observation dome watching distant stars, she was approached by Zyra, the crystalline being from her training session. The alien's faceted surface caught the starlight, creating mesmerizing patterns. "You've caused quite a stir, Captain Rhodes," Zyra's voice chimed like wind through crystal. "Some believe your success threatens the established hierarchy. Others see it as proof that the Academy's standards have fallen." "And what do you believe?" Alina asked. "I believe change is inevitable and those who resist it break." Zyra's crystalline form shifted, creating a new pattern. "But be careful. Not everyone appreciates having their assumptions challenged. There are rumors of accidents being arranged for promising candidates who upset the wrong people." Alina nodded, understanding the warning. "Where I come from, we have a saying, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, but sometimes that nail is holding everything together." "An apt metaphor," Zyra replied. "Though I should warn you, someone has been accessing your biological data from the medical bay. They seem particularly interested in human vulnerabilities." The warning sent a chill down Alina's spine, but it also hardened her resolve. If certain factions within the Academy wanted to eliminate her, they'd learn another human trait: we fight hardest when backed into a corner. That night, Alina began modifying her training routine. If someone was studying her weaknesses, she'd give them plenty of false data to analyze. She worked on new techniques that combined human adaptability with the various alien combat styles she observed. Let them think they knew how to break her. She'd show them that humanity's greatest strength was its unpredictability. As she finally lay down to rest, her body aching but her mind sharp, Alina smiled grimly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts to prove humans didn't belong among the stars. But they would learn what countless others throughout human history had discovered. Underestimating humanity was a dangerous mistake. Alina knew something was wrong the moment she entered the advanced combat training chamber. The air felt different, heavier somehow. Her combat instructor, the four-armed Threshold, was explaining the day's exercises, but Alina's attention was fixed on the environmental controls. Years of spacecraft maintenance had taught her to recognize the subtle signs of tampered equipment. "Captain Rhodes," Threshold's deep voice carried a note of concern. "You seem distracted." "The air mixture," Alina said, her eyes scanning the room. "It's been altered." She pulled out her personal atmospheric analyzer, a simple device she'd brought from Earth. The readings confirmed her suspicions. "The oxygen content has been reduced by 30%. Threshold's multiple arms tensed. "Impossible. The systems are automated." "Someone's trying to make it look like an accident," Alina explained. "Most species here wouldn't notice. Their respiratory systems are different. But for a human—" She left the implications unspoken. The chamber erupted into chaos as emergency protocols were initiated. In the confusion, Alina noticed a shadow moving through the maintenance corridor. Without hesitation, she sprinted after it, ignoring Threshold's shouts of warning. The chase led her through a maze of service tunnels. Her pursuer was fast, but Alina had spent countless hours studying the Academy's layout. She took a parallel route, cutting through a maintenance shaft, and emerged ahead of her target. The saboteur, a sleek, cybernetically enhanced being, skidded to a halt. "Impressive," it said in a mechanically modulated voice. "Most organics would have succumbed to the reduced oxygen by now." "Humans evolved in varying oxygen conditions," Alina replied, keeping her breathing steady despite the thinning air. "We're pretty good at adapting." She shifted into a defensive stance, nodding the cyborg's enhanced limbs and calculating weak points. The cyborg struck first, its augmented speed nearly catching Alina off guard. But human reflexes, honed by millions of years of evolution, proved faster than artificial enhancements. Alina dodged the initial strike and countered with a technique she'd developed, combining human martial arts with the increased gravity training she'd endured. The fight was brief but intense. The cyborg's advantages in strength and speed were offset by its predictable, programmed movements. Elena exploited this, using the confined space of the tunnel to limit its options. A well-placed strike to a crucial joint, and the cyborg collapsed. Security drones arrived moments later, led by Zyra and Threshold. The cyborg was detained, but Elena knew this was just the beginning. During interrogation, the assassin revealed nothing about its employers, but its very presence confirmed her suspicions. Someone powerful wanted humans eliminated from the academy. Later that evening, Elena met secretly with Zyra in the quantum communication hub. The crystalline being had been analyzing academy security protocols and discovered disturbing patterns. The sabotage attempts aren't random, Zyra's crystalline form pulsed with concern. They're tests. Someone is systematically probing for weaknesses in various species. Humans aren't the only targets, just the most recent. Elena processed this information. They're studying how different species react under pressure, but why? The survival trial, a new voice joined their conversation. They turned to see Threshold emerging from the shadows. It's the ultimate test at the academy, but this year something's different. The traditional challenges have been modified. Elena had heard whispers about the trial, a legendary test that pushed cadets beyond their limits with a different challenge each year. Modified how? The trial parameters are designed to exploit specific weaknesses, Threshold explained, his multiple arms moving in agitation. It's as if someone wants to ensure certain species fail. Or prove they don't belong here, Elena added, the pieces falling into place. By engineering failures, they can justify excluding entire species from the academy, maintain the existing power structure. Zyra's crystalline surface rippled with agreement. The Validians have dominated the academy for centuries. Other species gaining prominence threatens their control. Elena felt a cold anger building inside her. This wasn't just about human inclusion anymore. It was about justice for all species deemed inferior by those in power. We need evidence, she said. Something concrete that exposes this conspiracy. The trial begins in 3 days, Threshold reminded them. Whatever we do, it must be done before then. Elena nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. Then we have 3 days to turn their test into our advantage. They want to study our weaknesses? Fine, let's show them our strengths instead. As they dispersed, Elena returned to her quarters and began preparing. The conspirators thought they could break any species they deemed unworthy. But they had overlooked something crucial about humans. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't just survive. They revolutionized the rules of the game itself. She pulled out her tactical computer and started working. The survival trial was meant to be their proving ground, their moment of failure. Instead, she would make it the stage for the greatest demonstration of unity the Academy had ever seen. Let them test her limits. She'd show them that human ingenuity, combined with the unique strengths of other species, was a force that could reshape the galaxy itself. The morning of the survival trial arrived with an eerie silence throughout the academy. Elena stood in the preparation chamber with her unlikely team. Zyra's crystalline form glowing with nervous energy, Threshold's forearms meticulously checking their equipment, and several other species who had joined their cause after learning of the conspiracy. Remember, Elena addressed her team quietly, they've rigged this trial to exploit our supposed weaknesses, but they don't understand what real weakness or strength truly is. The chamber doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the massive trial arena. It was a technological marvel, a space that could reshape itself into any environment, any challenge. Above them, the observation deck was filled with Academy officials, including a contingent of Validian leadership. Welcome to the 537th Survival Trial, Nexus announced, its holographic form materializing before them. This year's challenge will test your species' fundamental capabilities. Success requires completing all phases. Failure means immediate expulsion from the Academy. The arena transformed around them, creating a harsh landscape of crystalline formations under intense gravitational pressure. Elena immediately recognized the intent. conditions that would strain both organic and crystalline beings to their breaking point. Phase 1 begins now, Nexus declared. Reach the extraction point while maintaining team cohesion. Solo completion will be considered failure. Alina quickly assessed their situation. The gravity was crushing, even stronger than their training sessions. The crystalline terrain would be lethal to Zyra, whose form could shatter on contact with similar substances. The atmosphere was thin, making it difficult for oxygen breathers while providing too much pressure for others. But Alina had anticipated this. "Formation Delta," she commanded. Her team moved instantly, implementing the strategies they'd secretly practiced. Threshold used his multiple arms to create a stable platform for Zyra, keeping her elevated above the dangerous crystal surface. Other team members linked together in patterns that distributed the gravitational load. "They expect us to either split up or collapse," Alina said through gritted teeth as they advanced. "Let's disappoint them." Their progress was slow but steady. Alina had studied how ancient human mountaineers tackled seemingly impossible climbs, not through brute force, but through technique, teamwork, and relentless determination. She applied those principles here, guiding her team through the treacherous terrain. From the observation deck, she could hear murmurs of surprise. This wasn't how the trial was supposed to go. Teams were meant to fragment under pressure, with stronger species abandoning weaker ones. Halfway through the course, the environment suddenly shifted. The crystalline terrain melted into a maze of energy fields, another calculated challenge. These fields would resonate painfully with Zyra's crystalline structure while simultaneously interfering with Threshold's neural patterns. "They're adapting their tactics," Threshold growled, his movements becoming erratic as the fields affected him. "So will we," Alina responded. She quickly reorganized their formation. "Zyra, remember how we discussed harmonic frequencies? Use your crystalline structure to deflect the fields. Threshold, sync your movements to Zyra's resonance." It was a technique they'd developed in secret, inspired by how human dancers could move in perfect synchronization. The energy fields, meant to divide them, instead became a conductor for their coordinated movement. The observation deck erupted in chaos. This level of adaptation wasn't supposed to be possible. Alina caught glimpses of Validian officials arguing heatedly with the trial coordinators. Then came the final challenge. The arena transformed into a chamber of pure chaos, unstable gravity wells, toxic atmospheres, and temporal distortions. It was an environment designed to be lethal to every species present. "Last push," Alina called out to her team. "Remember, humans have a saying, the strength of the wolf is in the pack." They moved as one entity, each member compensating for the other's vulnerabilities. When gravity intensified, they supported each other. When toxic gases filled the air, they shared filtration resources. When temporal distortions threatened to separate them, they anchored each other through physical and energy links. Alina's lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but she pushed through the pain. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that true strength came from unity, not division. As they approached the extraction point, alarms suddenly blared throughout the arena. The trial parameters were changing, a last desperate attempt by the conspirators to force their failure. But Alina had expected this too. "Now," she commanded. Each team member activated devices they'd secretly prepared, technologies that, when combined, created a stable bubble around their group. It was an innovation born from combining their species' different scientific approaches, proving that diversity was an advantage, not a weakness. They reached the extraction point together, not a single team member lost. As the arena powered down, the silence in the observation deck was deafening. Alina looked up at the Validian officials, her message clear. They had failed to break them, not because of any single species' strength, but because of their united resolve. The trial wasn't just survived, it was conquered. And in doing so, they had demonstrated a truth that would shake the Academy to its foundations. True power wasn't about the superiority of one species over others, but about what different species could achieve together. The Academy's Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with tension as Alina and her team stood before the gathered officials. Their unprecedented success in the survival trial had forced an emergency session of the Academy's High Council. The chamber's massive crystalline walls reflected the faces of thousands of cadets and instructors who had come to witness this historic moment. Crixther stood at the head of the Validian delegation, his silver skin dulled with barely contained rage. This was not a legitimate trial completion, he declared. They used unauthorized technology, violated traditional protocols. We used innovation, Alina cut in, her voice carrying across the chamber. Something that seems to frighten you far more than any physical challenge. She stepped forward, activating a holographic display. But let's discuss what really happened during this trial. The evidence they'd gathered played out before the assembly. Records of sabotage training sessions, modified environmental controls, and discriminatory trial parameters. Each piece had been carefully collected and verified by Zyra's crystalline data storage abilities and Threshold's multi-dimensional observations. The trial wasn't designed to test our capabilities, Alina continued. It was engineered to eliminate species that threatened the existing power structure. But in doing so, you proved something entirely different, that diversity is our greatest strength. The chamber erupted in murmurs as Alina's team demonstrated how they'd overcome each rigged challenge. They showed how Zyra's crystalline resonance, combined with Threshold's neural patterns and Alina's human adaptability, had created solutions that no single species could have achieved alone. This is the future of the galaxy, Alina declared, her voice firm with conviction. Not a hierarchy of species, but a coalition of strengths. Humans don't just survive, we bring people together. We see possibilities where others see limitations. From the council seats, the Academy's most senior instructor, a being of pure energy named Luminara, floated forward. For centuries, we have operated under the assumption that strength meant dominance. Perhaps we have been teaching the wrong lesson. Crixther stepped forward again, but this time his posture was different. When I first saw you fight, human, I thought your victory was an aberration. But now I understand. Your species' true power isn't in your muscles or your bones. It's in your ability to unite others, to find strength in what we considered weakness. The energy in the chamber shifted as more officials stood to speak. Species that had long been marginalized shared their own stories of discrimination. The evidence was irrefutable. The Academy's system of rigid hierarchy had been stifling innovation and progress. Luminara's form pulsed brightly. The survival trial has always been about proving worthiness. Today, we have seen a new definition of worth. Captain Rhodes and her team have shown us that the future belongs not to the strongest individual species, but to those who can work together. The Council's declaration was unanimous. The Academy would be reformed. The ranking system based on species would be abolished, replaced by one that emphasized cooperation and innovation. Alina's team would help design new training protocols that focused on combining different species' strengths. As the assembly dispersed, Alina found herself surrounded by cadets from dozens of species, all eager to learn this new way of thinking. She caught Zyra's crystalline gleam and Threshold's approving nod across the crowd. Your methods will change everything, a young Validian cadet told her, their silver skin shimmering with excitement. Can you teach us how humans think about problems? Alina smiled. Better yet, I'll show you how humans work with others to solve them. That's our real strength. We never stop learning, never stop adapting, and never stop believing in the power of unity. Later that evening, Alina stood in the Academy's observation dome, watching distant stars. Earth was out there somewhere, a tiny point of light among billions. Her mission had been to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy, but she'd achieved something far more important. She'd helped the galaxy understand its own worth. Threshold joined her, his four arms moving in a pattern that indicated deep thought. The Academy is already changing. Species that never interacted are forming study groups, sharing techniques. You've started a revolution, Alina. No, she corrected him. We started a revolution. Humans have a saying, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. The galaxy just needed a reminder of that truth. As new cadets arrived at the Academy in the following weeks, they found a different institution than the one Alina had first encountered. The halls were filled with mixed-species teams, each learning from the other's unique perspectives. The survival trial was redesigned to test cooperation rather than competition. And in the Academy's Great Hall, a new motto was inscribed: Unity in diversity, strength through understanding. Below it, in smaller text, was a quote that made Alina smile every time she passed it. They thought we were weak until we showed them the power of standing together. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Underestimating humanity was a mistake, not because humans were the strongest or the smartest, but because they could bring out the best in everyone around them. In the end, that was humanity's greatest strength, the power to unite, to adapt, and to rise together.